Welcome to the first episode of our new series called Your New Normal. I'm Hans Rueffert. You may recognize me as the chef without a stomach or from my work with the Gastric Cancer Foundation. But at my core, I'm just an ordinary guy who faced the extraordinary challenge of a gastric cancer diagnosis. I'm incredibly fortunate that I've been cancer-free now for over 2 decades, but it certainly hasn't been smooth sailing. I've had my share of really tough challenges and rough spots, and to be honest, I'm still facing some now. But for me, the combination of positive thinking, recent medical advances, a bit of luck, and the unwavering support of an amazing community has gotten me through to where I am today. If you or someone you love has recently been diagnosed with stomach cancer, getting that diagnosis can be an overwhelming and isolating experience. That's just the reality. It's your new normal, and that's why we've created this series. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. We are stronger together, and together we can find ways through this diagnosis. We can support each other, learn from each other, and discover ways to make things a bit easier on this journey. In this first episode of Your New Normal, we want to delve into the profound psychological and emotional impact of gastric cancer. With all of the physical and medical stuff involved in this diagnosis and treatment, this is a very important and very human aspect of the journey that is often neglected. Fears and feelings can be hard to voice, so we want to launch this new series by talking about some of those concerns today. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of my dear friends, Dr. Cindy Gallagher and Carol Zepf. They've both provided critical guidance and understanding to me and to many others. I had a chance to visit with Cindy at her home in San Francisco. Cindy's husband, JP, founded the Gastric Cancer Foundation after his diagnosis in 2007. So along with Cindy's professional expertise as a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in grief issues, she's had the personal experience of caring for her spouse and supporting their children through his illness and the loss of their dad.
Hans and I met several years ago when my husband, JP Gallagher, was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And along the way, we got hooked up, and I think that you were a very good support system for JP, around the same age, and you guys had this thing that was going on that was life-threatening and very under-researched and not well-known. And you struck up a really good friendship that was a big support system for him and for me as well, knowing that we weren't alone in this world of stomach cancer.
I guess it's like magnets. We found each other at the right time for all of this to kind of coalesce into something. But you were already on sort of the journey towards helping other people prior to his diagnosis, right?
Right. I was in graduate school. I was studying to be a marriage and family therapist, and I was interested in working in chronic pain. And then as I went through the process and did my hours and got licensed, I realized that chronic pain is very similar to, I was working in grief, it's very similar to grief. And I think that going through an experience of the cancer experience and then losing your spouse with little kids, your whole world is grief. And so I had to really understand what that meant, because I had never really felt anything quite like it. And when I don't understand something, I have to study it. Yeah. So I did an in-depth in grief, and now I make it my life's work and dedicated to JP, working with families going through grief, individuals, and as we know, everything can be a form of grief. Sure. Right.
Well, and actually reaching out to someone during a life traumatic event like that, that's one of the kind of things that brought me to have this conversation with you, is that, you know, we all approach mental health, I think, in a different way. And I came from a non-touchy-feely background, and that we didn't discuss our emotions, and we just, you know, put on that hard face and push through it. And in some ways, I think there, for lack of a better word, there can be a little bit of a stigma around the idea of needing mental health. So for a patient, for a caregiver, at what point would you recommend or reaching out or raising your hand and saying, hey, I could use some help here?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, many times it's family members that say, hey, my family, my brother, my sister, whoever it is in their family is suffering, and they bring it to their attention. Or it's someone who finds that they're unable to function in their daily lives, and it's really affecting every aspect of their life, not just them feeling sad. And when that happens, usually they'll reach out, and it just is helpful to have someone say, you know what you're feeling is normal, because grief is, all feelings are okay. But we as a society feel that if you're really sad about something and you can't let it go, that there's something wrong with you.
Sure.
And we know that's not true. And it's hard to get over stuff.
Yep. Or you feel like you don't want to be a burden and share
Right.
those things. And I guess, for me, on mental health, which, has become a bit of a buzzword, which I think can be a good thing because it's starting a more public and open conversation about mental health. But by the time you ask for help, I don't want to say is it too late, should it be a little more proactive than reactive, I guess is kind of what I'm asking.
Well, it's interesting now because grief has become such a big deal in the news. Everyone's talking about, particularly after COVID and different things that are happening in the world. People are much more acquainted with grief. And
Sure.
so people are coming many times with a pre-grief, say their spouse or their child is actively dying. They may start the grief process knowing that this is going to be really difficult.
Right.
So it's just because it's more of something that people are aware of, I find that people are actively seeking out grief services sooner than they would, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago.
Right.
But we do know that having someone, a neutral party, to be able to talk about grief can feel very relieving. Because I think you're right, Hans, they do feel this stigma of putting all this pressure on their family members or their friends and, quote, burning people out, unquote,
Sure.
right? So,
and that's a great term, burning people out. I found that oftentimes as the patient, I spend a lot of my time making other people feel okay about my illness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't know what to say. And I feel like I've had friends that said, I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And then it became too long of a time where I hadn't said something, which made it even more awkward. So it becomes this almost snowball of like, but I just tell people it's okay. And it's okay to say that you don't know what to say. Just acknowledging that I don't know what to say is saying something.
sure. And a lot of times, I just sit in silence. And I think part of the exciting thing about working in the therapeutic world and grief is to be able to witness someone's distress without having to fix it. And so being able to sit with is such an honor, I feel. And I feel if someone's going to let me into this part of their life that's so vulnerable and I'm able to be with them without any expectation, that can really help them feel that they can have this feeling pass through them rather than them having to explain it or to buck up by the end of the session and feel
Right.
all good, right? So there's something about sitting with that I think we could all of us, even all of us can have this experience of learning how to be able to sit with distress without fixing.
I think I come from that, I don't know if it's A-type personality where I want to fix people's problems, and learning to just listen. I think that's a great point. But expectations, do you have sometimes people that feel like it's a one and done, like I'm going to go to a session and it's going to fix me? I mean, how do you, without trying to sound like you're trying to sell them on services, how do you explain to them that this is a process?
Yeah. Well, I think, in the beginning, there's some psychoeducation that goes on. Most times people come to me and they're in shock. So they may not even remember even meeting with me.
Oh, wow.
So hopefully they'll come back again. But even if they don't, it's our job to expect that everyone's only going to come one time.
Oh.
And in that one time, it's our job to make them feel good about being in the therapeutic environment, but also to have something that they can take away from it that makes them feel like they have some control over what's happening to their mind and their body. Whether it's one specific tool, like, are you breathing? Are you able to find a space in your day where you can be quiet? Do you have one friend in your circle or family member who you feel is an ally and someone that you can talk to?
Right.
So we're trained that this is not something that it's a given. It's them coming into us and us being able to give one thing that they can walk away with feeling like they might want to do therapy more and that there is some benefit to it.
I've done therapy and love it, and I think it's what's interesting is sometimes you know the answer, but having to have the sort of awkwardness of saying it out loud kind of helps you wrap your head around finding the solution? Do you ever just kind of wonder, like you know the answer, why don't you know, drawing that out of themselves, I guess?
Yeah, I guess part of it is, my job is to just let it flow. And we all, as therapists, we all have different slants. I'm a humanistic therapist, so I believe in that the patient is the leader of the session, and so we go wherever they feel is helpful. Even if we stick on one feeling for an hour, that's where we stay. And so I think that it's a situation where we kind of just go there and stay there and see if it feels like they're able to let some of that out of them. I mean, a lot of times people come and say, I just feel like I can't breathe. Like, I'm so tight, everything's so jammed in. And we just talk about what that feels like for a minute. And then we talk about what's in there, and we go into their body, because we know that emotions are housed in our bodies.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And that can create lots of problems. I'm sure you know this in your experience of working with other cancer survivors who have things that hurt because they're stressed and they're thinking about it, or they're focusing on it.
I'm so lucky to have met Cindy and JP when I did. The time that we had with JP was short, but he created the spark that led to the Gastric Cancer Foundation, which has been growing ever since. Cindy continues to be a friend whose training and insights enable her to connect with and understand people in a very poignant way. Recently, I caught up with Carol Zepf, who was nice enough to make the drive to my home in North Georgia. And after lunch, we weathered a little rain to talk about the very important topics of grief, communicating with family, and living with uncertainty. So, internally, when you get the news that you have this life-changing disease, you get this absolute flood of every feeling that you have ever experienced and a lot that you haven't. But it's oftentimes hard to kind of distinguish between like depression, grief, anxiety, fear, and how to process those. I mean, I don't even know if those words are, if they overlap, if they mean anything. How does the person best deal with that news?
So what I'll do is I'll go through kind of what standard definitions are. But yes, people use those words interchangeably. You're absolutely right. I like to say grief is the minus sign. Grief is loss. I was here, then something took something away from me, and now I'm here. So grief is loss. I can never turn back the clock. I lost my innocence. I thought I would be healthy every day of my life. And there's grief in knowing you have to set that aside. That's no longer true. That's what grief is, right. Whether it's an idea or a person or a condition. Depression is a low-level feeling of sadness. We call that dysthymia. Is a way. It's a depressive disorder, okay. And it's slow. It just is a rumble.
So it's more of a constant, right? Or more of it's like a fog maybe, or a...
It's kind of the running commentary in your head. Where we always have some commentary, like, is it time for lunch? Or what time do I need to pick up my child from gymnastics? It's a thought process. And negative thinking that just doesn't ever pick itself back up is where depression can grow. But that's kind of what depression is. Okay. You mentioned anxiety. Anxiety is a phenomenon where we're in the past or we're in the future. And so there's a pattern, kind of like your windshield wipers. We are not anxious in the present moment, but we'll say, I am so anxious. But if you break that down, if you magnify and you look very closely at anxiety, it's jumping ahead and jumping back. And it is a psychological and physiological phenomenon.
No, that makes perfect sense. There's a term, and you learn all of these words when you are entering to the cancer community. But the term scanxiety, I don't know if you've ever heard that or not, but when you get the scan, whether it's a CT scan or any of those PET scan, you're waiting on results. And so the anxiety that you feel while you're waiting on the scan results is called scanxiety. And that is future forward, right? I mean, it's, the diagnosis was in the past, but now you're looking forward to, looking toward the future to, is my cancer growing? Is it getting smaller? Is it a recurrence? Has it come back? The anxiety that you feel in that moment is very real. And I, my stoic self would say that I'm not affected by anxiety, but in those moments when you're waiting and they say we'll have them back to you in 24 hours, but your scan was on a Friday and now you have to wait the entire weekend, those are not fun weekends. And I don't know how to turn those off. I have no idea how to, even logically, rationally, I know there's nothing I can do about it, but still knowing it and actually be able to flip that switch is not an easy task. So any suggestions on how best to dial that back?
I know for many, what I try to help with is being able to stay in the moment, whether that is fixating on just looking at my watch, just breaking this down to put my thoughts in the here and now. If I can be in the here and now, I'm not anxious. Physiologically, there's a lot we can do physiologically to slow down the process of anxiety. Caffeine, stimulating shows, the news, things that we know externally kick up anxiety, and taking those out of our diet, our relational diets, our physical diets, and slowing down those physiological symptoms. There are things that we can do. If you're able to get out in nature, the sunshine, take a walk, there are things to produce and increase your levels of serotonin. And so we can, if we can be successful with the physiological aspects, that'll also help the psychological aspects.
So the term journey comes up often, and on this journey, if you were to tell this story, in everybody's story, there's the final chapter, right? There's going to be acknowledgement that this story must at some point end or transition, however you think. So several times along the journey, death has come up. Now, whether in conversation about what do we do in a sort of quote unquote normal end of life, or there are times where it's in a cancer equation, it's brought up very early on, like that's discussed early on. Mm-hmm. How do we, with a spouse, with your partner, with your family, what's the best way to kind of breach that topic so that everybody's I don't want to say okay with it, but I don't know how else to say that, so they're comfortable. So
you have the best outcome possible, I think is what you're asking. Right. How do you do this? And I would say be direct. Today I have something I want to talk to you about. Are you open to that? And most times people will say yes.
Because they're thinking it anyway, right?
Yeah, or they're just curious. Sure. We're all curious. So there's something I want to talk to you about. Buckle your seatbelts. Or I think you might have wanted to hear this subject come up. I want to talk about my end of life. I want to talk about my funeral. I want to talk about who I want to give what to of my material possessions. Whatever it is, go for it and be confident. Trust in the process that your family will respond to you, and be caring and compassionate, but be thorough. Be you. This is not a personality change. We're not looking for you not to be your authentic self. So if you're funny, be funny. If you cry, cry. Be yourself and be brave.
I think that's great advice, because so often people try to do the stiff upper lip thing, and they try to hold themselves in a way, and today and that's going to make everybody in the room uncomfortable if you're not.
Right, they're going to think honest. There's something really wrong with you.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is to be inauthentic. Now, one skill you may have to employ and that I've helped people with is that if there's someone in your family who might be abrasive, then you pick up the skill of self-care. Okay? But otherwise, you be yourself.
Well, there's so much that we can't control in this entire picture that I kind of think embracing, you mentioned, your wishes. Like my wish is I would like for you to have, the lake house or whatever. I wish I had a lake house, but whatever it is, right? I mean, so your grandmother's wedding ring or whatever it is. I think saying those wishes, or what music you want to have at your funeral or don't want to have, probably.
Yes.
I think having those conversations is allowing you to control something, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's something you absolutely can control. And in those moments when you're in a free fall of a cancer diagnosis, to be able to have a little bit of control on something, even if it's something posthumous, I think that's a nice, empowering
It's a great
thing.
point. And if you're at the opinion or the point where you are saying, I don't care what they do, I don't want to decide, then I say, okay.
Yeah, that's also their.
That is okay.
Yeah, that's also their prerogative, and they're in control of that. If they don't
That's
wanna,
right.
if
And
they
you
have-
can let them know that.
That's great. That's
So
empowering.
so they're not looking for papers and things that don't exist.
The thing I have noticed, and I would have never imagined myself in a position to be speaking with people at an end of life thing, is that people underestimate their loved ones sometimes. They think that their parents aren't going to be strong enough, or their siblings or their partner's not going to be strong. It's amazing how many people, how many patients in that situation are just surprised, like, wow, they really rose to the occasion. I think that's a beautiful thing too, to see as a patient, to see how the loved ones or the patients surround, bigger family, extended family, how they rally, how they can, there's strength where you would sometimes not imagine it.
We see that, definitely see that. Where there's adversity, there can be great heroism.
They've just never been given the opportunity to show that, right? I think anytime there's even you'll see it where there's a traffic accident or a house fire, people run to it. That if you would have asked them, they would have said they would run away from it. But put in that position, the strength that they muster is impressive.
It's very heartwarming, and there may be someone that's going to listen to this someday who is not having that experience. And to that person, I would say, it's okay. It's still part of what normal is.
No, great point.
And you're not on the fringe.
Talking to loved ones can be difficult, but with a little guidance and finding the right approach that connects with you, you can have those hard conversations. I love Carol's advice to be yourself, be authentically you. There is no single right way, so do it your way. And while you're at it, don't underestimate the strength and compassion of your friends and family to handle whatever it is you have to say. Let's go back to Cindy and talk about how you might find the resources you need in your own community. So if a patient or even a caregiver kind of feels like they're at the point where they want to raise their hand and say, I could use a little help, how do they start that process?
Many times, the Cancer Center can help you with a social worker or someone on staff who does do therapy at the hospital. And many times these cancer centers have a really great program where you can actually see someone while your loved one is being treated, which I think is really convenient, particularly if you have children. And a lot of them have outpatient services that are part of the hospital.
Okay.
It just depends on what hospital you're going
Sure.
to. There's also resources in the community. Many times there's a grief center or an organization that does outreach to the community. And I worked with CARA, which is an outreach program that specializes in grief in Palo Alto, which services many people, children, families, groups, and I've worked there as well. It's helped my children immensely. And then many times after you go through the grief center experience, then you can see an individual therapist if you need more help that is ongoing, or maybe it's a complicated grief situation.
Right.
So there are many resources, and Psychology Today can be helpful in helping you see therapists who specialize in grief.
And I think the they weren't there when you and I were starting on this journey, but there are a lot more resources than there were, and I hope that's a trend, especially in light of post-COVID, where we're having this conversation, we're going to see more and more. And I love that idea of starting with your care provider, because they already have a lot of those things in place and are ready to answer those questions. And depending on where you live and what the center is, they can push you in that direction. I would also say be mindful, or I don't want to say wary, but at least go in with both eyes open on some of the online support groups, because even though they are possibly well-intentioned, you get a lot of like with anything, if you ask an opinion on the internet, you're going to get a lot of interesting reactions, which may or may not be helpful.
Right. And also you're going to get on these online groups, and I always recommend, don't recommend a group in the beginning, because you're getting people's stories with their own situation, their own diagnosis, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how you're going to do it.
It's very specific.
Yes, exactly. And there's also, if it's not moderated by a professional, it can become kind of unmanageable in lots of ways, and it can get off track of what's going on in the meeting, and kind of helping with the actual facts and the support around the people who are in the group.
Even if you live in a rural community like mine, there are people who can get you the help that you need. Resources are available, but it may take some persistent effort to connect with them. It's okay to lean on your caregiver to help you seek out those resources. You don't have to do this by yourself. I hope you found our discussions today helpful, and if you're looking for more resources, please reach out to your medical team and local professionals for guidance. Extensive information is also available at gastriccancer.org. Visit our website and sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on research information and services available to you. We look forward to bringing you future episodes that are useful as you find your new normal. As always, we would love to hear from you and welcome your input. It would be great to receive your feedback and hear what you'd like for us to discuss in future episodes. You can email us at info@gastriccancer.org. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care and gesundheit. Be well.